Nature is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you. Your gas company and America's natural gas industry, developing new ways to use clean gas energy to generate electricity and fuel vehicles to help meet America's goal for cleaner air. Siemens, a whole new world of ideas in electronics and electrical engineering. Siemens, precision thinking. And by Canon, quality and innovation for the way we work and live. Canon.
Hello, I'm George Page. Join me and my colleague, Dr. Nikolai Drozdov, as we explore one of the most infamous places on Earth, Siberia. For many Russians, and Americans as well, the very mention of Siberia can cause shudders of fear. Siberia, that place where nobody wanted to be sent. Siberia, that place where so many suffered and died during the darkest days of communist rule here in the former Soviet Union. It's therefore surprising to me, Nikolai, that in spite of this tragic history, there's so much to be offered by Siberia to anyone who loves nature and wildlife.
Yes, indeed. It really was a land of tragedy and great sadness for us Russians. But now people dream of going to Siberia to live there, because now it's a land of huge opportunities and great beauty. Lake Baikal, for instance, in the heart of Siberia, is the deepest and oldest lake on Earth, and it's the most enchanting place. And the Siberian forest, it's so vast that it's bigger than the whole of the United States.
The wolf is part of the image of Russia. It features in Russian children's stories, haunting the endless forests and dragging travelers from their troikas. In reality, wolves are usually harmless to people, but the forests do seem endless. A sea of conifers stretches almost unbroken from the Baltic Sea in the west to the shores of the Pacific in the east. Siberia is the greatest forest in the world, spanning 6,000 miles and 11 time zones. This frozen forest is called the taiga. Siberia is drained by three great rivers, Yenisei, Ob, and Lena, flowing 2,500 miles north to the Arctic Ocean. For half the year, they're locked solid by ice. Other than Antarctica, no place on Earth is colder than Siberia. Winter lasts for 8 months. It's a bone-chilling cold that punishes the senses and creates a world of frozen stillness. But in these snowy forests, there are creatures on the move.
This is Siberia. I expect to think that the whole of the Soviet Union is like this in winter. But this is a special place even by Russian standards. it's Yakutia in northeastern Siberia, and the coldest place in the northern hemisphere. We have recorded temperatures here as low as minus 70 degrees centigrade. That's 126 degrees of frost on the Fahrenheit scale. Today is quite warm, it's only minus 40. Even so, my breath freezes instantly and I have to wear thick furs to save myself from dying of cold. Amazing that any small creatures can survive these temperatures, and yet, incredibly, some animals live right through the Siberian winter. This is one of them. It's a Siberian marmot. It's cold and stiff, but it's not dead. It's simply hibernating, and if I warmed it up, it would come to life. But the kindest thing to do is to let it sleep for another few months. Hibernating is just one way of surviving the winter, but as you'll see, there are many others.
The forests of my country are very special to me. This is where I grew up and where I fell in love with nature. And this is where my career as a naturalist began. Every day as a young boy I kept a nature diary, notes about the weather, the animals and the plants. My father taught me how to observe wildlife in the woods near our home. This is a musk deer. It's a male, distinguished by its remarkable tusks, elongated canine teeth.
Musk deer are the source of the musk used in perfumes. Only the males produce musk. They use it for marking their territories. The glands, or pods, that secrete musk are worth more than their weight in gold. So, over much of their range, musk deer have been hunted almost to extinction. Siberia is their last stronghold.
The musk deer's staple diet is lichen. In the forests of southern Siberia, the trees are often covered with luxuriant growth. When there are a lot of deer, all the lichen within easy reach is soon eaten. The deer are skilled at climbing into the branches, though sometimes they get more than they bargained for.
Siberia's forests have a long history with people. In the 16th century, Russian colonists crossed the Ural Mountains and forged east, lured by Siberia's rich resources. The most prized of those riches was fur, wolf and lynx, ermine, mink, and sable. In those days, furs weren't worn just for fashion, but to keep warm, like the animals they were taken from. Today, most Siberians live in cities, but there's still a scattered peasant population. It's a hard land to wrest a living from, especially in winter. People and their livestock are dependent on supplies gathered during the brief Siberian summer. For the wild creatures of the forest as well, laying in supplies for the winter is the key to survival.
By November, only the last remnants of the fruits of autumn hang frozen from the branches. Birds such as jays and nutcrackers are breaking into their winter stores, Siberian pine cones buried weeks before. The nut-like seeds of the Siberian pine play a vital role in the economy of the frozen forest. They are one of the richest sources of food in autumn, and they are easily stored.
Fluffed up against the cold, even small birds, like tits, can find enough to survive the winter, hunting through twigs and dead leaves for torpid insects. Winter in Siberia may seem bleak at first glance, but if you stay around a while, you see so many interesting things.
These are no ordinary dead leaves. They've been sewn together with silk by hibernating caterpillars. Inside this homemade tent, they are sheltered from the chilling wind. Not only do they bind the leaves together, they tie them to the twigs with a silken thread. That keeps them up in the branches, where the green leaves of spring will give the caterpillars their first meal after the winter.
When I was young, every day I had to walk 4 miles through the forest on the way to school. It was so beautiful, white blankets of snow covering everything. It was extremely cold, but we have an expression, there is no poor weather, only poor clothing. You have to know how to dress in Siberia, so we were always bundled to protect us from the cold. When I was older, I would stay in the frosty forests for weeks to do my research, so I learned to build snow igloos. Snow itself can keep you warm if you know how to use it.
Close to the Arctic Circle, the midwinter sun barely climbs above the horizon. All is gripped in unimaginable cold.
In burrows deep beneath the snow, marmots are hibernating.
Their body temperature is only about 40 degrees, and their hearts are beating less than once a minute. But once every 2 weeks, they wake up to urinate. It takes them 4 hours to bring their temperature back up to normal, and during the process, their heart rate rises to an incredible 300 beats a minute.
After a few hours, they'll go back to sleep again. They spend 8 months of the year in this torpid state. Chipmunks are hibernating too, but they wake up every 4 days. And unlike marmots, they've stored supplies of food in their burrows. They're too small to lay down enough fat to see them through the winter, so they have to wake up at intervals to feed. It's a risky process. The strain of raising their bodies from near freezing to working temperature sometimes kills them. But if they didn't do it, they'd starve to death long before the spring. Food alone isn't enough for survival. They store ice in the burrow as well for moisture. Red-backed voles stay active right through the winter, foraging beneath the snow for berries and lichen.
When they are not feeding, they retreat to their warm nest.
In summer, these rodents are pugnacious and solitary, but now they curb their aggressive instincts and huddle together for warmth.
In the dry taiga of northeast Siberia, the snow isn't very deep. In these shallow runways, they're vulnerable.
A great gray owl. Its hearing is so acute that it can actually pinpoint voles moving beneath the snow.
Other predators are also on the lookout for prey. An ermine in its warm white winter coat. And this tiny shrew, it weighs less than half an ounce. It has to feed at least once an hour and is active throughout the winter. Most of the time, it's beneath the insulating layer of snow, hunting for frozen insects. But when it's exhausted all the food in one place, it comes to the surface and risks temperatures far below zero. By April, the sun is climbing higher in the sky. Everything in the forest tells you that spring is coming. The snow is melting from the branches above, the air changing from bitter to crisp. And then there are the birds. Among the first birds to nest is the Siberian jay. Jays are the most beloved birds in our forest because when you walk in the woods, they fly very close and even follow you. It feels like they've come to greet you. This male is feeding his mate on the nest. It's too cold for her to leave the eggs, even for an instant.
By nesting so early, the jays take advantage of spring's first spiders and insects. And when their chicks fledge, other birds will just be hatching their young.
Great gray owls nest later in the spring, though like most owls, they don't build nests of their own. They prefer to take over nests abandoned by other birds of prey. Some smaller owls nest in hollows, relying on woodpeckers to excavate for them. The woodpecker's old home is a perfect fit for a boreal owl.
By May, the snow has melted from the valleys, but beneath the surface, the earth is still frozen. This is the permafrost. Here, the ground never thaws deep enough to let trees put down roots. The permafrost stops meltwater from draining away. It holds it on the surface as bogs and pools. The pools are staging posts for migrant waders on their way north, and for others that will stay here to nest, like these wood sandpipers. Within days of the thaw, the pools come alive. Creatures that have been locked solid in ice for months renew their activities. Dragonfly and water beetle larvae, even fish. By late May, the evening sun barely dips below the horizon. It's then that one of the taiga's strangest rituals is enacted.
As daylight fades, black-billed capercaillie gather at traditional display grounds. This is one of my favorite sounds in the forest. It's a true sign of spring when you hear the call of the capercaillie ringing through the trees. Capercaillie are about the size of turkeys. The birds that are calling are males. As many as 20 may gather at these tournaments. We call them deaf birds because when they call, they get so excited, their blood races and the blood vessels in their ears cut off their hearing for a few seconds. This is important to remember if you want to get a close look at them. Most of the time, they hear your every move and will fly away. But at a certain moment during the call, they hear nothing. Then you can dash in a few feet and wait until it happens once again.
And this is what it's all about, attracting a mate. As soon as a hen appears, the cocks redouble their efforts, trying to lure her onto their territory and mate with her. Soon after sunrise, the capercaillie disperse. Although the snow has gone, Arctic hares have yet to lose their white winter coats. Now the ground's unfrozen, they can dig for roots and tubers. All through winter, they've had nothing to eat but bark and twigs. It's a wonder that any trees grow here.
In a week or two, their fur will turn gray, but for now, they are conspicuous targets for hunters like golden eagles.
Eagles usually produce 2 eggs, but they start sitting as soon as the first is laid. That means that one egg hatches before the other, so one chick is always a bit larger. Sooner or later, the older chick attacks its smaller, weaker sibling. Even though there may be food on the nest, it harries it relentlessly. It won't stop until its unfortunate nestmate is killed or driven over the edge. This happens in 4 nests out of 5.
It looks cruel, but it will mean more food for the surviving chick.
In Siberia's hard economy, it greatly increases the parents' chances of rearing at least one young. Only exceptionally is there enough food in these savage surroundings for 2 chicks to be raised.
The eaglet's mother has caught a willow ptarmigan. The survivor will have the meat all to itself. In the short Siberian summer, it's a race against time to fledge before the return of the cold.
Although it's almost June, the larch in which the eagles nest shows only the first hint of fresh green needles. Down below, anemones are pushing through the soil, the first flowers of spring.
On the Lena River, the ice is breaking. A cavalcade of ice floes 5 miles wide grinds its way north to the Arctic Ocean. 1,000 miles to the south lies one of the wonders of Siberia. Lake Baikal. Baikal is a place of superlatives. It's enormous, 400 miles long and up to 50 miles wide. It's incredibly deep. It lies in the trench of a rift valley, and in places there's more than a mile of water beneath the ice. That makes it the deepest lake in the world. An incredible 20% of all the fresh water on Earth is here in Lake Baikal. It's also extremely old, more than 20 million years old, by far the planet's most ancient lake. And because it's so old and isolated from other lakes, many of the creatures that live in its waters are unique. About 1,000 animal species are found nowhere else on Earth.
As the ice flows shatter and decay, life begins to stir.
Rising from the depths, creatures crawl upward through the ice.
Caddis flies. There are at least 20 different kinds on Baikal.
Most kinds are fully winged, but some are not. They skim around on the surface in search of a mate. This explosion of insect life gives birds such as wagtails a welcome spring feast.
Sometimes the caddis swarm in unbelievable numbers. In the cool of the evening, caddis flies make for the shore.
They cluster together under rocks. Here they are sheltered from the chill wind, and by grouping together, they increase their chances of surviving until dawn without being frozen. But it leaves them vulnerable to another danger.
Bears.
For Baikal's brown bears, the caddisfly season is a bonanza. It's their first chance to stock up on protein after the winter. All along the shore, they come out of the woods to gorge themselves. These tiny cubs were born when their mother was still in her den. it's their first picnic on the beach.
The Caddisfly feast brings unusual concentrations of bears together. For the cubs, that has its dangers. Male bears sometimes kill young cubs.
The cub's mother leads them back to the safety of the forest.
The last ice floes don't melt until mid-June. Baikal's water is a huge reservoir of cold, and it has a profound influence on the weather of the surrounding forest. Farther away from the lake, spring came weeks ago, but only now are these birch and poplars growing new leaves. On the forest floor, Berginias bloom. By now, the snows on the surrounding mountains have melted. It's said that 365 rivers flow into Baikal, one for each day of the year. In most places on the lake there is little shoreline, and the rivers plunge into the depths. But the Selinga River meets a great expanse of mud, forming a huge wetland. It's a haven for wildlife. Muskrats were introduced to Russia for their fur. Muskrat hats are still popular today as protection against the fierce Siberian winters. They build mounds of vegetation, platforms where they eat in peace, safe from predators on the shore. In summer, this huge wetland is a welcome stopover for migrating birds. It's also the breeding ground for the black and white winged tern. Like so many wetlands around the world, this delta is now threatened with pollution. But the birds still return here every year to breed and raise a family. For such an enormous lake, Baikal has only a few islands, and these attract some of the lake's most famous residents.
In midsummer, Baikal seals gather on the Ushkani Islands. They are the smallest of all seals and one of only two freshwater kinds. They are more than 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean. Their ancestors must have become landlocked in Baikal after swimming up one of the great Siberian rivers.
There are some 60,000 of them altogether. They come to the Ushkani Islands to molt. Space is at a premium. All the best places on the rocks are soon taken. You are more likely to be tolerated if you give your neighbor a good scratch.
Beneath the surface, Baikal is unique. Freshwater sponges 6 feet tall luxuriate in the shallows. The sponge forests shelter creatures found nowhere else. For example, there are dozens of different kinds of cutted fish. For the evolutionary biologist, Baikal is the Galapagos of Siberia. Over 20 million years, the lake's original colonists have diversified into a huge variety of forms. This match-head-sized crustacean is called the Baikal horse. Wherever it goes, it carries 2 tiny boulders, perhaps as camouflage or as ballast. These are omul, Baikal's most prized fish. Originally, they came from the Arctic. They're members of the salmon family and, like their relatives, are very good to eat. Each autumn, massive schools run up the rivers to spawn. To see Baikal's strangest creatures, we must go deeper.
This is Pisces. It's a kind of submarine designed for deep ocean research. But now it's working here on Baikal, helping to unlock the secrets of the planet's deepest lake. Now they are just going to launch it, and I'm going to join the crew.
A journey to the deep. This was one of the most exciting adventures of my life, a unique and privileged opportunity, and one that we are about to share.
It's very cramped inside here. There's barely room for 3 of us. We can stay down for more than 8 hours. But after 1 hour, the humidity will rise to 100% and will get really cold. But now we are ready to go.
As we descended into the darkness, hundreds of feet below the surface, it was a bit frightening, because no matter how modern your equipment, it's always dangerous so far underwater. But I enjoyed the thrill of it. Now we're at the bottom of the lake. There's a video camera mounted outside. We can see its pictures on this screen. Most of the lake bed is fine mud, 20 million years of silt. In places, it's 5 miles thick. You could bury Mount Everest in the mud at the bottom of Baikal. It's only just above freezing down here. It's completely dark, and this is the first time these creatures have ever been in the light. Most of them are blind. strange fish and crustaceans live at these depths. Some are transparent and appear ghostly in our lamps. Unlike most deep lakes, there is plenty of oxygen down here for animals. But plants cannot live in this darkness. All the creatures depend on the rain of detritus falling from above. Scavenging fish wait patiently for a meal to fall into the deep. Skimming along the lake bottom, one did not think about anything else but the wonders and mysteries we were seeing. But that changed very quickly when we tried to ascend back to the surface. We got stuck in a narrow canyon, and our propeller was smashed against the canyon wall. There was no way the ship above could help us. Fortunately, the captain was very skilled, and he got us home safely. It was an incredible experience, one I will never forget.
By September, the first snows of winter powder the mountains around Baikal. Autumn is the time to harvest the fruits of the forest. Collecting mushrooms is a tradition, and it's not just country people who do it. Every autumn, city dwellers go out into the woods around Moscow and other big cities to gather mushrooms. There are at least 36 different edible varieties. Everyone in the family pitches in to help gather and prepare the mushrooms for winter storage. One generation teaches another which types are poisonous and which are not. After harvesting, they're threaded like beads on a string, then hung up to dry. In times of shortages, they're a welcome addition to the family diet. In the winter, they'll be prepared in a wide variety of ways, cooked in soups, pickled, marinated, and fried with milk.
The forest's wild creatures are laying in supplies for winter too. Jays and nutcrackers are gathering Siberian pine nuts. Chipmunks cram their cheek pouches. They'll store the nuts in the burrows where they spend the winter. Even our Russian bears take advantage of this final flush of food. They must lay down enough fat to last through the long winter's sleep. It's a race against time to gather enough for survival, and a race you can't afford to lose. In Siberia's harsh economy, only the thriftiest will see next year's spring.
Soon, this realm of the Russian bear will fall silent. The bitter chill of the long Siberian winter will again seize this great forest in its icy grip. Next on Realms of the Russian Bear. Russia's Far East is a land born of fire, where the earth still smolders. It's cold and fierce, and in places lush, almost tropical. Join us for our final destination to the land born of fire.
Nature is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you. Siemens, a whole new world of ideas in electronics and electrical engineering. Siemens, precision thinking. And by Canon, quality and innovation for the way we work and live. Canon. And by the gas industry, helping provide cleaner air with clean gas energy. This is PBS.